You're listening to The Higher Ed Marketer, the podcast for marketing professionals in higher education. Join us every week as we talk to the industry's greatest minds in student recruitment, donor relations, marketing trends, new technologies, and much more. If you're looking for conversations centered around where marketing in higher ed is going, this podcast is for you. Let's get into the show.
Welcome to the Higher Ed Marketer Podcast. Today is a special and a different episode, but as always, I am here with my usual co-host, Bart Caylor, and always friend. But Bart, we're doing something a little bit differently today.
We are, and it's really uncomfortable for me because I'm on the guest seat instead of the co-host seat. So I'm going to pass it over to Zach to talk about what we're going to talk about today.
It's good to see everybody. Hey, it's Zach Coffin, the VP of the Higher Ed Marketer. And hey, we've got a cool episode today. Bart and I have a ton of conversations day in and day out about higher ed marketing, and we've been spending a lot of time the last several months talking about what's coming in 2026. And so I went to Bart and I said, hey, we need to do a podcast episode to kind of let everybody into our meetings, into our conversations, and really kind of look ahead to what's coming in 2026. So today's episode is Bart's predictions and marketing insights for what's coming in 2026. And it's not all about AI. There's a lot of AI. There's a lot of book stuff. There's a little secret at the end and all that kind of fun stuff. And we're just excited to be on here. And Troy, it's always good to hang out. And I think it's time to put Bart in the hot seat.
Absolutely. So Bart is going to be playing the guest role. Zach is going to be playing Bart's usual role, and I'm going to sit back and have some fun. And now, here's our conversation with Bart Caylor. Bart, I so hope you came to this interview of you with a proper question, or proper answer to this question that we put the spotlight on for all of our guests. Yes, so please share something interesting or surprising that you've learned recently that might give our listeners a new perspective or maybe even a good laugh.
Well, I will tell you right now, I did not come prepared to do that. And so,
you broke your own rule.
I broke my own rule. I will tell you, though, something that I have learned today prepping for this is that it's much harder to be a guest than a host on this podcast. I will say that in a heartbeat. And so it takes a lot of guts to get behind this mic and be interviewed about something, even though you're an expert in it and even though you feel passionate about it. I've often heard the guests say, I'm a little nervous. And I always joke and say, oh, don't worry, we'll take care of you. Well, I'm a little nervous today, guys, so take care of me.
Well, that's because you know that Zach and myself are going to bring it, and we're going to turn up the heat and just make sure that you are uncomfortable. No, that's opposite. Amazing. And everyone, the reason why we are here is that Bart dropped a wonderful blog post December 2nd, 2025, and it's on the Caylor Solutions blog post. Is that correct, Zach?
Yep. You can find it at Caylor-solutions.com.
The title of the blog post is Marketing Trends in Higher Education, What to Expect in 2026. Bart, we are all feeling the shifts faster than ever. And if you would, what's one shift that you've seen most clearly on campuses this year that's affecting marketers in real time?
Well, I think what I'm starting to see is that, I was talking to David Hogue at CCCU about this a few weeks ago, just the idea of, what am I seeing on campuses? What's he seeing on? We both said the strong campuses are getting stronger and the weak ones are getting weaker. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's also part of what's driving a lot of things right now is that there's desperation, especially for some of the campuses that are not doing well. There's this desperation to do better. And so I think that that's kind of driving a lot of the shifts. I think AI is driving the shifts. I think all the headwinds, whether it's, the enrollment cliff or the search cliff or any cliff you want to talk about, I'm going to give you a new cliff that I'm going to define today, and people can start talking about is the trades cliff. I think we're going to start seeing a lot of students opting out of traditional undergrad 4-year and go into the trades. And so today I'm going to name that the trades cliff. And so we're going to have less students because a lot more students are going to go into the trades because we have a desperate need for that right now. And so those are some of the challenges. I mean, I could go talk about that for another hour about my theories of what schools need to do about that. But as far as your question, why is this all shifting? Because we got a lot of headwinds, and people in higher education don't really know how to be agile and adjust to the headwinds and to shift things around. And so that's part of the reason why I'm doing so much of what I'm doing.
So with those pinch points and those headwinds that you're talking about, Bart, I think it can be challenging as a leader to discern through like kind of our environment and which headwinds are really affecting us the most and those types of things. Like, are we adapting fast enough? Are hesitant to change? You and I've talked a ton about change management. Why do you think? Where's that friction coming from? Like, where's that friction for change management with the headwinds? Like, where's that rooted in?
I think it's rooted in just the traditions of the academy. I mean, I think that the academy has always been a little bit of the sage on the stage, a little bit of, hey, this is the way we've always done things. This is the way things work. And there's a lot of tradition in that. And I'm not against tradition by any means. What I'm against is slowing down and not moving and being agile because of tradition or because of something. And so I think that's where one of the challenges is that higher ed has historically been known as slow to change. We can't have that luxury anymore. Paralysis by analysis is a real thing in higher ed. And I think that that's where a lot of the leaders that I hope that are listening is that we have to step in and start making some decisions that are not going to be popular. There's going to be a lot of things that we might say. I know that I'm saying things on campuses, the quiet things out loud that I end up being person non grata to people on campus because they don't like people moving their cheese and shifting things around and challenging the status quo. But I mean, we're in a 5-alarm fire that we've got to start waking up to realize that we don't have the luxury just to wait.
Well, I think what you're saying there, I think I want to call out is there's a couple of responses to that pressure, right? We can either be paralyzed and fearful in that, or we can take courageous leadership steps to actually look across the field and actually see what's going on and make some hard leadership decisions to actually put those things. And like, I know you've spent a lot of time the last 3 years talking to presidents and cabinets about this. Like, talk a little bit about that role between the president and the marketing and how that's all evolving with that upper leadership level, because the things that you're talking about aren't just marketing issues, right? Like, it would be easy to, like, these are like higher ed leadership things, but yet sometimes there's this gap that happens between presidents and cabinets and the marketing part. Like, talk to that a little bit of like, how can we bridge that gap a little bit? How can we put the fires out? Because we don't want to just be scared of what's coming, but we actually want to operate out of boldness and courage.
Yeah. And I think that comes down to, as you've pointed out, the courageous leadership. I mean, I borrowed that from Joanna Salday at Credo in her book that she wrote. And I think that the idea is that being a president on a campus is one of the hardest jobs there is, because I think it can be lonely, and it can also be one of those situations where you have to make decisions for what's best for the institution, not what's best for a certain group or certain person or a certain amount of people. And so that's hard leadership. And that's what leadership's all about. But I think that the idea of some of the friction that's happening is that we are having to kind of birth our way into a new way of thinking. And anytime you have birth, anytime you do something new, there's pain involved. And I think we're too adverse sometimes to pain. We're too adverse to conflict. And sometimes we have to look at the greater good to say, are we going to survive as an institution? If so, it might be worth going through some of that growing pains and some of those birthing pains to do something new and to lean into that, as opposed to just thinking it will go away, because it's not going to go away. These headwinds, these things that we've been talking about, they're not going away. They're increasing in frequency. They're increasing in difficulty. And as I look at it, I mean, my domain expertise is in marketing, but as I grow and as I gain more, relationships and I start to see more and I start to lean into the fact of, I've seen these things happen, and I see it from campus to campus to campus. There are trends emerging. There are things that are emerging that I feel it's my responsibility as a responsible person in the industry to start pointing some things out. And whether that is in marketing or whether that is in just trends that I'm seeing, I feel that I need to start speaking up on that.
Bart, are schools adapting fast enough, or are some still hesitant to change? And if they are, why the friction to change?
I think it goes back, and some schools are moving fast. Some are not moving fast enough. Some are not moving. I think the resistance just comes back to that thing where we aren't used to things changing in higher ed. If you think about, even just an enrollment as an example, 25 years ago, enrollment had been done the same way that it had been done the previous 100 years. I mean, it was a catcher's mitt. You waited for the ball to come across the plate and you caught it, and you enrolled them and you got it going. Well, it became a lot more competitive. It became a lot harder. The enrollment cliffs made it more challenging. And so there's a different way to approach things. And I think that, again, we're sometimes slow to change in higher ed. And I think that even just the slowness, but also just the apprehension of change. And I think that's why tenure exists. That's why you see a lot of people who've been at institutions for 30 years. They retire from the institution that they were alumni from. It's because of that consistency that higher ed has provided and that security that higher ed has provided. I mean, if you look at any other industry, the average for millennials right now, and especially Gen Z and Alpha, you're going to have like 15 different, stops in your career. And that's just unheard of from just a few decades ago. And so those all add up into really making change difficult.
Bart, we've talked about what's shifting. So now let's talk about what marketers should be preparing for as we move into 2026. What are a couple of the top shifts that you are already seeing movement in that will shape higher education marketing into 2026?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, Troy. And I think that's really what was the heart of doing this blog post. I mean, every year about this time, we kind of say, well, what's going to come? I mean, people are always, casting their predictions and their vision of what's coming. And so I wanted to do that, but I wanted to do it a little bit differently in the sense that, AI is going to take more precedence. And yes, there's going to be, it's going to be harder to get students. We all know that. Those are not necessarily, observations that need to be mused or published even. But what I tried to do is to say, okay, what are some shifts that are happening and what could higher ed do about it? And so one of the first things that I see coming is this idea that there's a lot of shifts happening in our culture and in marketing in general. And what I like to know, I've done it my entire career when I work with higher ed, because early in my career, I did a lot of work with like consumer brands like Motorola and RCA. And I was always fascinated because the work we were doing for Motorola at the turn of the century, when we were trying to help people understand what SMS and how you could take a picture with a phone, all that crazy stuff that we take for granted now, they were developing marketing campaigns toward, at the time, the millennials, which is today's Gen Z. They were aiming it toward teenagers. And I remember being in a war room up at Motorola up in Waukegan, Wisconsin, or Waukegan, Illinois, at their world headquarters, having all these big boards about what they're getting ready to roll out with these new cell phones, which was the predecessor to what we have today. Motorola actually developed a lot of that stuff before Apple kind of took it and ran with it. But back in the day, I realized that, man, they are going after the same market that my colleges that I'm working with are going after. But they're spending millions and millions of dollars on research of what these young students and young prospective students and teenagers are all about. And I realized that if I pay attention to what Motorola's doing, or if I pay attention to what Target's doing, or all these consumer brands that have an investment in seeing that teenagers adopt their product or service, if I take from their playbook, I could apply that to higher ed, and man, that could really move some needles. And so I've been doing that my entire career. And what I've realized is that the people who know the marketing the best are not the people in higher ed, they're the people outside of higher ed. So I pay attention to people like Seth Godin or Gary Vee or other people that are the experts. And so the first thing I did this year in my prediction for 2026 is that I said, what's Gary Vee saying? So I looked at his stuff and I realized that I'm trying to pay attention to these are the things that he's saying. These are the 5 things that he's got coming. And so I'm like, what of those 5 things could really pay off for higher ed? And what I realized is that I really think that the 5 things he talks about, if I boil them down into just what I think is important for higher ed, it's the idea that we've got to reframe these global trends for higher ed marketing. So he has all these global trends. I don't need all 5 of them. I need 3 of them, and I'm going to twist them into higher ed. And so the first one is the idea of curiosity content and random virality. So the idea that people, the threads in social media are now based on, what the subject matter, not based on followers or anything else. It's what you're publishing about. And people are curious because they see something and they stop the scroll and they look at your post, and you can go viral just on a random fact. And so higher ed needs to kind of get into the mode of, how do we feed curiosity about higher ed? What are the top 50 questions people are asking about higher ed? Turn that into content. And now that content can be viral. So in the post, I talked more about that. But then we also need to think about the idea that random moments of honesty, the social proof that we've always talked about, carry a lot more weight now in social media. They carry it in real life. People want to know what other people think. That's why products like Zemi are so popular, because they're peer-to-peer marketing. And I think that's one thing that we need to get our heads around, is the fact that, what are we doing in higher ed marketing that's peer-to-peer? How are we letting students tell other students the important thing? How are we letting prospects tell other prospects the important things of why they're choosing this school? We need to get out of the way sometimes and let those things happen. And a third thing that I think that Gary Vee talked about that I really pulled out was the idea that these alternative sports and the new campus culture, so pickleball, esports, all these things that are a little fringe or were fringe, now are mainstream. And there are students that are making decisions about where to go to school based on what they're going to do outside of class. And if we're not leaning into our student life and really telling the story of what campus looks like, those are things that we've got to really lean into. And so being able to take some of Gary Vee's stuff and then repackage it into higher ed is one of the first thing of my 5 trends that I've really tried to focus on.
I think one thing I want to pull out from what you just said, Bart, is, we talk a lot about AI, and we talk a lot about the rise of AI and all those types of things. But so much of what you just talked about really pushes to that authenticity piece, because these aren't scripted videos. They're intentional, but they're not scripted. They're excellent, but they're not overly polished. These types of engagement that students are having, and that's a very different marketing mindset than sometimes traditional higher ed has had, where it's got to be, fully on brand, fully edited, fully crisp. We would never put something out that's 80% done. It's got to be right. There's that tension, which I think plays into one of the things that you've talked about, is just the rise of this marketing generalist. Yeah. Like just this jack of all trades who can just get in and do stuff. Talk about that a little bit, of just the type of people we need to be looking at for our team, especially with what's going to be required with learning with AI, just this generalist that we need to have to be able to push the mission forward.
Yeah. And I really am a big believer in the idea of a generalist. I mean, I think that one of the trends is going to be kind of disengaging from digital, and it's this return to real life. And I think that we've got to have people that can shift their marketing thinking into, how can I get people engaged, rather than what's the tool that I'm going to use, or how am I going to make this look pretty, or how am I going to, and nothing against it. I'm a graphic designer, so I can kind of say those things because it's important to me of how things look. But if that becomes the king of everything that we're doing, if the end product is what we hold up as that success, and we don't get students in the door, then we've missed the whole thing. And so that's why I think the idea of a generalist who's adaptable, who's able to pivot, who's able to kind of look out across the landscape and say, I see that coming. I'm going to need these reinforcements behind me to help us get there. Somebody who can be more of the general in the sense of a generalist that can actually, muster the troops together and get things moving. I think that's going to be something that we desperately need, as opposed to these specialists that only know how to do, you tell me, you give me this, I will churn it out and make it look like this. That's great. Needed skill. But do we need to have an entire marketing department filled with people like that? I don't know. That's where I think if it were me and I was a specialist right now, I would start looking at how can I get up from what I'm doing, and I'm this, this graphic design specialist. How can I gain some new skills either with AI or with some other things to become more of a generalist, so that if someone tells me, hey, I need somebody to go out and shoot a video for this, I got a phone. I know enough about how to frame something. I can go do that because it needs to be authentic. Just because the title videographer is not in my title doesn't mean that I can't jump in and make an impact. And so I think we're going to have more of that. As leaders, we're going to need to demand that. As specialists, we're going to need to step up and step into those roles.
Every time we teach our master class, you share that quote from Toffler of, the illiterate of the 21st century isn't going to be somebody that can read or write, but that's somebody who can learn, unlearn, and relearn. Yeah. And I think when I'm thinking about what you're describing, like part of that is just this willingness to not forsake our subject matter expertise, but leverage our subject matter expertise and then deliver that subject matter expertise in different areas so that we can be more agile as a team, because we all feel under-resourced. We all feel understaffed. We all feel like we wish we could do more. But what's so mind-blowing to me now especially with when you look at how millennials and Gen Z want the type of environment that they even want to work in. They want to work in a more generalist environment where everybody's owning the mission together. Everyone's owning the momentum. Everyone's owning the project together. And then they show up and they perform because they feel like they're actually a part of the bigger whole and not just this little narrow sliver. Bart, you and I were on a call just a few moments ago, and metrics came up, and data, and research, and all those types of things. And we all love data, we love the research, but sometimes data can clog us down and keep us from making the right moves when we need to move it. Like, what are some of the metrics or some of those the research stuff that we as higher ed marketers need to kind of be hesitant about or leave behind, so that we can really start measuring what actually matters the most?
Yeah, I think that's really good. And I heard Jamie Hunt say this recently, and I really appreciate this. So I'm going to get, shout outs and props to her. She said, we can't be data driven. We have to be data informed. And I thought that was really wise and really a good nuance to everything, because we're always talking about data driven. And I think Stephen Rudd actually made a comment about that too when he was doing a presentation with me at AMA. We've got to look at the things that are going to matter, and we also have to hold those loosely. We have to make decisions based on data. We can't just, shoot from the hip and just, gut feel it. But we also can't be so paralyzed that we're over-analyzing data to a degree that we're not acting. And I think it goes back to what we said earlier. I think that's one of the challenges, is that too many times we overthink things and we try to do something that it just doesn't make sense because we've lost the opportunity. We've lost the moment. I remember being at a campus one time, and I was trying to get them to, they were trying out TikTok, and they were seeing tremendous success on the engagement and the driving the calls to action and things. But their internal marketing department, this was admissions that was trying it out, their internal marketing department was basically requiring them to review and vet every piece of TikTok thing that they would do. And they were taking 2 to 3 weeks to vet them. And by then they were missing the trends, they were missing the opportunities, they were missing everything that had to do with the magic of what they were seeing. And so that's a good example of over-analyzing something, overlooking at it, trying to make sure that everything is buttoned up and that everything that we do. Sometimes you just got to let it go, and it's all going to wash out, it's all going to work out in the wash. And we just have to go and lean into things. Yes, look at the metrics. Yes, look at things. But when you do look at those metrics and something's working, don't try to re-engineer it and figure out why it's working. Just continue to do what you're doing. Figure it out later when it's not working anymore. But man, if something's working and the data shows it, just keep doing it. And you don't have to understand why.
Bart, what is the role of brand trust and storytelling in building long-term enrollment success?
I was on a call earlier today, and again, I'm shouting out everybody today. Jay Fedge was on a call with me, and he talked about just the currency of trust, and that's something Zach and I talk a lot about at Caylor Solutions. Is that we are in a world of the currency of trust now, and I think that probably is one of the most underutilized brand building tools that there is right now. I think we like to talk about brand personality. We like to talk about the brand elements and, everything about brand, and that's great. But if nobody trusts your brand, it doesn't mean anything. And so it's really important to build that trust, and that's with reputation. It's with showing up and doing the same things. It comes down to how your brand is being felt by your constituents. I mean, you can really have a really strong brand, but if somebody comes on campus and they don't feel it, then it's not a strong brand. It might have good recognition, it might have good awareness, but if they don't feel what you're saying, it doesn't matter, a hill of beans. And so that's one of the things that I think is really important, is that if we are starting to do that, you start, trust is built by showing up and doing the things that you say you're going to do. It's simple. It's not real sexy stuff. It's just showing up and doing the work. And we talked earlier about the idea of, being able to become more of a generalist. One of the things that just drives me up a wall, and anybody who knows me knows this, is that if somebody were to tell me, well, that's not my job, I'm not going to do that, you will probably see me lose my cool so quick, because it's the idea that that's not my job. It's everybody's job. I mean, I've been on campuses where it's like, well, recruitment, that's really not my job. I do this. It's like, well, if you want to keep your job, we need to be working together on a recruitment. We need to be doing these things. And so you got me off on a little bit of a tangent of a getting off on a preaching thing. But I think the idea of really being able to lean into trust building, I think, is so important for our brands that sometimes we overlook that.
So good. As we're looking ahead to 2026, we've talked some about the challenges and those types of things, but where do you see just some real opportunity for us to step in as marketers for 2026? Like, where is that diamond in the rough, or that where you're like, man, we've really got to work hard at this in 2026 because there's just so much opportunity available?
I think really understanding enough about AI to realize that it is a tool that you can use. I think we're still at the point here in December of 25 that we are. It's a trivial thing. It's kind of like getting the toy out of a Cracker Jack box, and some of you are too young to even know what that is, but Troy would appreciate that. That you've got the idea that you think that's like the greatest thing ever, but you don't realize that that's just a little trinket when you've got all this other stuff over here. And so I think that a lot of us are missing the opportunity with what AI is because we don't understand what it could be. We're focused in on, we don't like the way it sounds. It doesn't feel right, and all these other things that we haven't done enough flexing to just play with it. And so I think that's one of the underutilized areas that I think we're going to see going into 2026. And I think the other underutilized thing is then putting the pieces together and stringing everything together in a comprehensive way that actually moves the needle, and not overanalyzing it, but actually just saying, you know what, if I try this and this and this, and I'm doing this within a mission fit context, I can actually make something happen. And that goes back to not overanalyzing and not overthinking, just trying, failing, trying again, trying. We have to be quick. We have to do things in a quick succession. If it doesn't work, cut loose and do something else. I think the days of 5, 6, 8 month trials of something are over. It's got to be 5 days. Did it work? No, move on. It's got to be that quick, and that's where we are today.
I want to double tap on something that you just said, Bart, and then we can move to the next section here. Is you just talked a lot about being willing to fail and fail fast and keep moving forward. Yeah. And I think part of what we've been learning, as you and I have been doing these master classes with people, and this mindset that's required, is we've got to be people that are willing to try stuff early and adjust fast, and not be so worried about failing. But within a team setting, what's required of our leadership is the willingness to embrace that level of pace so that failure isn't fatal. Because I've been a part of teams where failure is fatal. Yeah. And you were so worried about getting this one thing wrong or whatever that it kept you from actually being bold and moving fast and moving forward. And so I just don't want to miss what you just said of just the speed that we need to be working in, because especially with the AI stuff, I think where people are missing the opportunity is it's actually not changing how they're doing their work yet. They're tinkering with they're like, hey, I'm going to write some emails, or I'm like, but they're actually not using it to actually change the way that they're actually doing their work, because that requires a little bit of openness, that requires a little bit of extra effort, that requires it requires a leadership environment that allows space for that. And so what are you seeing? Where are you seeing people succeed in that type of a culture where failure is not fatal and we can actually try these things out?
Well, I mean, it's not because of me, but I'm going to say in the culture we have built at Caylor Solutions, I mean, we are running fast and hot with AI. And we had a fumble recently. And it was one of those situations where we face planted pretty hard because we used AI, we didn't double check it, and it was wrong, and we delivered it wrong, and that was okay. And I think that we learned some lessons. Nobody got nobody got chewed out. It's part of the culture, part of what's expected, and part of what we do. And so I think that takes leadership. And again, I'm not stroking my own leadership, but I'm just saying that I've learned that from my mentors, and I've learned it from other people that I respect, is that if you're going to expect your team to kind of move fast, be agile, do things, people are going to trip. It's no different than a football team. If you're going to be aggressive on the gridiron, you're going to have a fumble or two.
You're going to have some flags.
You're going to have some flags. But if you can be okay with that and you're still moving the ball and you're still scoring the points and you're still getting down the field, you can live with some of that. And I think that the process and moving forward is so much better than perfection. And so I think that I'm seeing some of the strongest leaders that I know are okay with that. They're okay with when things fumble. They're okay with, it's not permanent, but we also have to make sure that it's not happening all the time.
Yeah, we're fixing it.
We've got guardrails in place too. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's experiences I've been having. Thinking
it's great. And it requires the trust of the team to be able to operate in that way.
Goes back to that trust issue.
Yep, back to that trust thing.
Okay, so I have been very excited about this next topic, and something that is very exciting for 2026. We all know that Bart has been sharing insights for years, and he's captured a lot of these insights in his new book. He's also sharing his perspective on leadership. So Bart, why now? What inspired you to write Know What You Don't Know, and what gaps are you hoping to close?
So I guess the first thing is that I'm old enough now that all of my friends are becoming presidents at colleges. And so I realized that a couple of years ago. I'm like, oh, you're now a president. Oh, you're now a president. And what I realized is that they were still my friends, and they were still calling me, asking me questions about things. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, okay, that's kind of cool that we have that relationship. But then what I started realizing is that I was talking to other presidents, and I'd walk into a challenging situation. Hey, our marketing isn't working. Can you help us? And I would, roll up the sleeves, and we'd look at budgets. We would look at, the staff. We would do everything that a president or a leader would do. And I started realizing that there were things happening that shouldn't be happening because a leader didn't ask the right questions. Whether it was overspending on something, or spending something that they shouldn't and didn't need, or somebody in a seat that wasn't the right place on the bus for them. And nobody challenged it because they didn't know the questions to ask, especially about marketing. And so what I decided is that the best way I could help with that, because I have awareness and I have visibility across a lot of different campuses, if I could take some of those nightmare situations that I saw that were unique to one campus, if I could assemble those into categories of different parts of marketing, whether it's AI or websites or, programs and the 4 Ps, or whether it's, digital advertising, if I could take those and then tell presidents, these are the questions you need to be asking your team, your vendors, your partners. These are the things that you need to ask. You don't need to be an expert on digital advertising, but you need to know enough of the language to ask thoughtful questions. And that's what my hope was, to put together a real practical field guide about marketing that leaders could look at and reference and be able to, ask the questions to get the most out of their teams.
So good. Well, that book is coming out. I'll let the cat out of the bag a little bit here. January of 26th, that book drops, and I've gotten to do several pre-reads of it. And I think the thing I'm most excited about at Bart is just, it's so approachable and just such a honest look of of just how to help, just how to fill that gap and help bridge that gap between president cabinets and their marketing teams, and really just give everybody common language. Because I think so often there's tension with different things, not because there's even a disconnect with strategy, but just because there's a disconnect with understanding or language that's being used. And so I'm really excited to see that thing hit the market and just help a bunch of schools. So as we're pulling into the close here, Bart, what if a president or marketing leader wants to prepare for 2026, what's one piece of encouragement that you would want to give them as they're looking ahead? Some people are looking at 2026, super excited. Other people are looking pretty exhausted. But what's a piece of encouragement that you could give them as they look ahead in anticipation?
I think one thing that I would really tell leaders to do, and this could even be, you're leading the marketing team or you're leading, 2 or 3 other people. Take a breath, assess what's going on, and pick a direction and start going down it. I think there's a lot going on right now. Keep in mind too, we always do these year-end 2026 what's coming thing, and I know in higher ed we're not anywhere close to the year end yet. I mean, that happens in the middle of the summer for most of our schools. But the thing is, we are still in a place where we can do some things right now, learning what's coming, pivot mid-course, and really see a big impact on our fall 26 class, on the graduate and professional programs that we're doing every 12 weeks. We can make some changes now, especially if we take a breath, look at things, make some changes, and lean into it and make some quick wins. Those things, that momentum will happen. And I think right now what leaders need is some quick wins to build the momentum to kind of be able to get into 2026 at a real strong pace.
Wonderful. Everyone, we've been talking to Bart Caylor, the president of Caylor Solutions, about what he sees the trends are in 2026 and his new book coming out in January. Bart, I think we all know this, but for someone that is just now listening to this, they've stumbled upon this podcast episode, what's the best way for them to reach out and contact you if they would like more information or a simple chat?
Yeah, you can jump on LinkedIn and follow me at Bart Caylor. I think I'm the only Bart Caylor on LinkedIn, so it should be pretty easy to find me, Caylor. Or you can go to our website, Caylor-solutions.com. If you click on the contact form, I get copied on everything, and our team would be happy to talk with you. Or if you just want to reach out and chat, I'm happy to do that, and always encouraged to talk with other folks too.
Great. And we also have Zach Coffin, who is the VP of the Higher Ed Marketer and AI Initiatives for Caylor Solutions. But I think I could have summed it up better as saying that he's Bart's right-hand man. Zach, is there a way that people can reach out to you?
Same way, LinkedIn's great. And as Bart said, we're always happy to have a conversation, see how we can help.
Well, thank you both for a wonderful and robust conversation. And for our listeners, thanks for joining us for this very special episode of the Higher Ed Marketer. Be sure to jump over to the Caylor Solutions blog to read more about Bart's 2026 predictions and share the episode with a friend. We would also love for you to join the Higher Ed Marketer community on LinkedIn. This podcast is brought to you by Caylor Solutions, your trusted partner in higher ed branding, enrollment strategy, and mission fit marketing. We look forward to seeing you next week with another great episode.
The Higher Ed Marketer podcast is proud to be a part of the Higher Ed Marketer Podcast Network. Discover even more conversations, resources, and tools to help you grow your institution at thehigheredmarketer.com, your go-to community for all things higher ed marketing and leadership.